All right, so let's recap. I believe where you left off, and I'll let you jump in on this, is in and around Genesis 30. I'm going to use Genesis 30, verse 43. Don, can you read that for me?
Thus the man increased greatly and had large flocks, female servants and male servants, and camels and donkeys.
All right, so where y'all left off, the session was called Blessed. And it seems no matter what, Jacob is still learning to trust God, learning to depend on God, and he's not doing everything right. Jacob was born a trickster, and he's still got a little bit of that conniving in, but he's kind of met his match. Hey, Juanita. He's kind of met his match in the person of his uncle Laban, because Laban's been a trickster from way back, right? But in spite of the suspicion the two have for one another, God continues to bless Jacob, and because Jacob is with Laban, Laban's getting some of the derivative benefit of all that blessing, right? So now, by this time, Jacob has worked for his uncle Laban for over 14 years, 7 years for Leah, right? His first wife, who he was tricked into marrying by Laban, and then 7 years for Rachel, all right, who he marries the following week, but owes 7 years of labor to Laban for Rachel. Now, God has given Jacob great abundance, and Jacob now, he's paid the 7 years for both, all right? And he's got flocks, he's got herds, he's got male and female servants, and he's got a lot of kids. We're going to see that. So he's been abundantly blessed. And now Jacob wants to go back to his home country. However, again, Laban, who's been profiting derivatively by God through Jacob, doesn't want to let Jacob go. All right? And so he wants Jacob to stay. That's kind of where we left off there. And it gets a little confusing, the children that Jacob had with both wives and their servants, so a total of 4 women. So I kind of made this, and let me see if I can blow it up just a little bit. Can't tell the players without a program here. But in a 7-year period, that's what we were talking about before we started class, 7-year period, Leah, Zilpah, her maidservant, and then Rachel, Jacob's second wife, and Bilhah, her maidservant, through Jacob have now 12 children at this point. Okay? Follow the arrows, so forth and so on, different mothers. This will come into play later on. Believe me. Okay? But that's part of the blessing that God is giving Jacob in spite of himself and in spite of his situation with Laban. Okay, so where you see large flocks, female servants, male servants, camels, donkeys, and wives and children. Okay, so here's the situation. Let's not leave God out of this. God told, way back in chapter 28, I believe it was, God tells Jacob that he will be blessed. He essentially passes the tenets of the Abrahamic covenant from Abraham to Isaac and now to Jacob, but Jacob's got some work that needs to be done on him, kind of like us. God, in the meantime, in spite of Jacob, continues to bless him. And derivatively, Laban over here, who's always looking for an angle. You know people like that. They always got some kind of side hustle going. They're trying to trick somebody. He's conniving. But he is benefiting from the blessings that God has given to Jacob. And the sons, we don't know how many sons, but Laban's sons, who would inherit all that Laban had, they're interested in this because as Jacob does well, Dad does well, and then when Dad dies, we get more. So you see the economy that's going on up here in Haran. Okay, great. And then this happens. Now we're in chapter 31. So Genesis 31, verses 1 to 3. Lee, please read that for me.
Sure. Now Jacob heard that the sons of Laban were saying, Jacob has taken all that was our father's, And from what was our father's, he has gained all this wealth. And Jacob saw that Laban did not regard him with favor as before. Then the Lord said to Jacob, return to the land of your fathers and your kindred, and I will be with you.
All right, now there's a lot going on in here. Let me just summarize what's happening. You know, on the previous slide, I said, God's blessing Jacob, and derivatively, Laban's profiting from it. And so how does it turn into this sort of kind of all of a sudden? Well, it's because Laban, at some point now, Jacob asked to leave. This was after 14 years of working for him. And Jacob says, now let me go. I've paid you for Leah. I've paid you for Rachel. Let me go. And Laban doesn't want to. Says, hey, name your price. Keep you here. And they make a deal, to shorten this, about sheep and goats and herds, okay? And Laban secretly tries to trick Jacob by taking all of the good of both those flocks and handing them over to the sons, so that Jacob can't prosper anymore. Because of this, remember the Abrahamic covenant? Those who bless you, I will bless, and I will curse those who curse you. When Laban began trying to take from Jacob, to renege, to welch on the deal that they had made, the derivative prosperity that Laban was experiencing ended. Once he and his sons began to rob Jacob and harbor ill will toward him, this is the Abrahamic covenant in effect. Okay? And so now the sons are upset because they're losing their portion of their father's inheritance because God is against them. And God's against them because they are no longer a blessing to Jacob. They wish Jacob harm. All right? It's 6 years after this now, after Jacob first requested to leave Laban. And I want you to get this. Laban wanted to keep Jacob to profit off of him, right? Jacob wanted to go home 6 years earlier, but here's what's important. All of this is happening in God's timing. Despite what Jacob wants, despite what Laban wants, it will be a total of 20 years from the time that Jacob arrives in Haran and begins working for Laban and the time he leaves, a total of 20 years. That is God's timing. I bring this up because, oftentimes, we've all been around a little while. We pray and we pray and we pray for this thing or for that thing that happened, and we feel very sure that it's in God's will, but it's not happening. It's not happening in our time. It's not happening on my schedule. So somebody must be wrong. Okay. Whenever you start to think that, I know nobody actually says that, but whenever you start to think like that, remember this. If somebody's wrong, it ain't God, right? It's us. And God may not be saying no. He may simply be saying what?
Like,
wait. Yeah. Absolutely. Come on in. He may be saying, wait. Think about it. All of the things that God has to put in place in order to make something happen for little old me. All right? Let's say that I've got it spot on. He wants something for me. All right? But all of the things around the world with other people in my family, people I haven't even met yet, that has to come to pass before he can give me what he wants me to have. He's weaving a tapestry that concerns everybody. Anybody ever hear of the butterfly effect? The butterfly in one part of the world flaps his wings and it changes everything everywhere else. Okay, that's kind of a awkward way of saying that the tapestry that God weaves in order to put you where he wants you to be concerns a whole lot of more people than you. And so, if it's not happening in your timeline, the answer may not be no from God. The answer is wait. Let's get things lined up. And that's what's happening here. All right, any questions on this? We're still in chapter 31. And just to get our bearings here, all right, we're up here in Haran. right? This is the border between Syria and modern-day Turkey today, okay? It's also referred to as Padan Aram, but we are calling it Haran. And then, here's where we're going, right back home. This is the general vicinity of where Jacob left 20 years ago. And does anybody remember why Jacob left home 20 years earlier? Anybody remember? Why did Jacob leave home in the first place? Excuse me.
He tricked his brother, and his brother wanted to kill him.
So Jacob has a twin brother, does he not? His name is Esau. And way back 20 years earlier, he tricked both Jacob and Jacob's mother, Rebekah, conspired to trick Isaac, his father, who was blind, to give the blessing to Jacob instead of the father's intent to give the blessing to Esau. Once Esau finds out about this, he vows, when my father passes, I am going to kill my brother Jacob. Rebekah hears this and figures out, hey, I got to get him out of here. So they send him up to Haran. She thinks this will pass in a couple of months or whatever. Actually, we're not told that Jacob ever sees his mother again. 20 years have now gone by, all right? But God now says, take everything that I've given you in that 20 years that you've been here and take it all back. Go back to your home country and back to your kinsmen. That'll be important later. 500 miles at 10 miles a day with all that he owns. You know, that's pretty ambitious, 10 miles a day. We're talking about 2 months. 2 months journey, okay? All right. Still in chapter 31. Dawn, can you read verses 17 to 20, please?
So Jacob arose and set his sons and his wives on camels. He drove away all his livestock, all his property that he had gained, the livestock in his possession that he had acquired in Paddan Aram. So to go to the land of Canaan to his father Isaac. Laban had gone to shear his sheep, and Jacob tricked Laban the Aramean by not telling him that he intended to flee.
All right, that's important. Laban was not going to let him go that easily. He would have come up with some other kind of trick or whatever, and Jacob was tired of it. Besides, now he has a commission from God, get up and go. So he waits until Laban and his sons take all of their flocks to someplace to be sheared. I don't know where the shearing happened, but it's a 3 days journey to go there and get them sheared and then 3 days back. So this is an opportune time for Jacob to pick up all that he has and leave before Laban finds out. So he can get about 3-4 days lead on them headed south. All right? But it's still a trick. Jacob is still depending on deceit to get by. And this is a pattern with Jacob. All right? Now, the wives, Leah and Rachel, fully support Jacob's plan. And then this happens. In the packing out, Genesis 31:19, the second part of verse 19. And Rachel stole her father's household gods. Household gods, these are clay figures, stand about this high. There would have been 5 or 6 of them, one for good weather, one for fertility, one for general protection, so forth and so on. And these would be kept in a cabinet in the large room in the house. And they actually served not only as pagan deities for protection and so forth and prosperity, but also as the title deed to the house and the property. Rachel may have thought by stealing this, that would have left on Laban's death Jacob, her husband Jacob, as the inheritor of all that Laban had, or she may have just wanted to upset her dad. Okay? Believe me, I got daughters. That happens. Whatever her reason, though, this was robbery, should not have happened. Additionally, it ensured that a vestige of that family's idolatry would follow Jacob and all that he had right back down to his home country. And we will see in later chapters that begins to play out. Okay? Well, what else happened? Verses 22 to 24, when it was told Laban on the third day that Jacob had fled, he took his kinsmen with him and pursued him for 7 days and followed close after him into the hill country of Gilead. But God came to Laban, the Aramean, in a dream by night and said to him, "Be careful not to say anything to Jacob, either good or bad." Now, this is the only recorded encounter that we know of between Laban direct with God. This must have been quite a moving experience, because what do you think was in Laban's mind as he was chasing down Jacob? What do you think he was going to do when he caught him?
Probably kill him.
He may have, although he's a kinsman, maybe not killed, but he would have taken everything from him. Listen, Laban wanted everything Jacob had anyway. This would have given him the reason. You stole away with my daughters. You stole away with my grandchildren. You stole away with all these flocks and herds. All of that is mine. You gained all of that while you were working for me. And because you stole away with it, I'm taking it all back. Laban, at a minimum, would have taken everything that Jacob had. Right? But God comes to Laban direct. Be careful. I know what's on your mind. Be careful. All right. Verses 25, 26 of Genesis 31. And Laban overtook Jacob, and Laban said to Jacob, "What have you done? That you have tricked me and driven away my daughters like captives of the sword." I'm going to shorten this. A big argument ensues between Jacob and Laban, and they get to tell their whole story of how Laban thinks he's been so good to Jacob all these years. And Jacob says, "You've cut my wages 10 times, and despite all that you've done, God has blessed me. And now you're accusing me of stealing your idols. I never stole your idols. Search the entire camp, and if you find the idols, whoever took them, I will punish." All right? Obviously, Jacob doesn't know that his wife, Rachel, stole the idols. His favorite. And, right, because, and here's a practical tip too. Don't make absolutes like this. When you got enough people in your family that you don't know what happened, don't say, "Hey, if you find it, whoever took it, I'll punish." I can't remember if you said I'll kill or whatever, but the point is, don't do that. Now, turns out Laban never found those idols because Rachel hid them under a saddle and then sat on the saddle, and when her father came in to search the tent, she said, "I'm sorry if I don't get up, Dad, but I'm having that time of the month." And the father naturally said, "There's no problem at all. Good to see you," and leaves. So they never find the idols. All right. And the idols, therefore, remain with the family. And I'm telling you, in later chapters, that makes a difference. Anyway, Laban and Jacob make a covenant. I don't like you, and you don't like me. May the Lord watch between you and me while we're apart, one from another. Have you ever heard that phrase before? May the Lord watch over you and me while we're apart, one from another. We sometimes use that as a blessing. This is where it's used in chapter 31, and it was not intended as a blessing. It meant, I don't trust you, and you don't trust me, so the Lord be the witness. If you do anything to harm me and I do anything to harm you, and we're going to build a rock and we're going to put it in this place, and the Lord is our witness and our judge. That's what that means. And so they leave in a relative tense peace. Laban goes back up north, and Jacob and all that he has continues their journey south. Did I leave out anything important? We still haven't gotten to today's lesson. But what has happened is Jacob now has one enemy family member behind him. Laban is headed back up north. That's good. But coming up, he's got potentially a much worse enemy family member before him. And who is that? That is his twin brother Esau. Hasn't seen Jacob for 20 years. The last thing he said about Jacob 20 years earlier was, "When my father passes, I am going to kill my brother because he stole my blessing." Okay? And so this is what Jacob has to look forward to as he's moving closer and closer to his home country of Canaan. All right, that brings us to the lesson for today, Genesis chapter 32. Lee, please read verses 1 to 5.
Jacob went on his way, and the angels of God met him. And when Jacob saw them, he said, "This is God's camp." So he called the name of the place Mahanaim. Then Jacob sent messengers before him to Esau, his brother, in the land of Seir, the country of Edom, instructing them, "Thus you shall say to my lord Esau, thus says your servant Jacob, I have sojourned with Laban and stayed until now. I have oxen, donkeys, flocks, male servants, and female servants. I have sent to tell my lord in order that I may find favor in your sight."
All right. So as Jacob looks forward to this meeting with Esau, he knows how he left things 20 years earlier. And he needs to feel his brother out. So he's going to send messengers forward. And he's going to abase himself and make sure that Esau knows I come in peace. Right? On the way, it says, the angels of God met him. And when Jacob saw them, he said, "This is God's camp." And he called the name of that place Mahanaim. This is the first occurrence we have in Scripture of what can rightly be called guardian angels. That is to say, those who are sent by God to watch over, look after, protect us. Hebrews 1 verses 14. Are not all the angels ministering spirits sent out by God to serve, that is, to accompany and protect those who will inherit salvation? That's a rhetorical question. The answer is, of course they are. Mahanaim actually means two camps. So this wasn't just a couple of angels. This was a host of angels, at least as large as Jacob's camp. And that's why the name Mahanaim is used, or that's why he calls it that, because Mahanaim, I thought I put that in there. Nope. Mahanaim means two camps. So he had his own camp, and at least an equal-sized camp of angels around him. This is confirmation from God that what I told you to do, you are doing, and my protection goes with you. Do you believe in guardian angels?
Yes.
The answer should be yes. How many guardian angels go to work when I get behind the wheel of my car? I don't know. I don't know, because normally we don't see angels of any kind. This is a special case in which God allows Jacob to see for confirmation you're headed in the right direction, and because you're in my will, I've got you. Okay? He's got you too. All of this, all of the Bible's revelation is meant for our edification, for our understanding of the kinds of protections that God provides. Now, that's not the only way. That's not the only means by which God protects his people. That's one way. We're going to see another way here in just a second. Let's go with verses 6 to 8. Don, please.
And the messengers returned to Jacob, saying, "We came to your brother Esau, and he is coming to meet you, and there are 400 men with him." Then Jacob was greatly afraid and distressed. He divided the people who were with him, and the flocks and herds and camels, into two camps, thinking, "If Esau comes to the one camp and attacks it, then the camp that is left will escape."
Okay. So, now if you read the commentaries on this thing, this part here where Jacob separates, Leah and those children, these are all grown men. The children are pretty grown at this point, and servants and so forth. And then you've got Rachel's camp and with Bilhah and all of those folks, and separate them. And going through all of that, some of the commentators say this shows a lack of faith. You just saw a host of angels. God has got your back. You don't need to do this. I take a different approach to this. One of the ways that God protects us is through guardian angels. But another way that God protects us is through our good common sense. Okay? If you're about to be attacked and you don't want to lose everybody, You break up the camp, you put a couple of miles distance between them. So if Esau is coming with 400 men and he comes against one, you have to, listen, that's common sense. And common sense is a gift from God that helps us to protect ourselves. That's one way to look at this, all right? Like I said, some of the commentators say it indicates an immature faith. Listen, God said he's got you. You don't have to do anything. Let me just tell you a short story about that. It's not a short story. Okay. There's this guy. He's sitting on his front porch. A huge rainstorm comes. The weather forecast says it's going to be torrential flooding and you need to evacuate. How many people have heard this? Okay. But the guy says, I'm all prayed up. God's got me. So he continues to sit on his porch. The rain comes and the waters begin to rise. Along comes a guy in a boat and says, hey, you better get on. This rain is going to keep coming. He says, nope, God's got me. I'll be fine. Water comes up to the porch. The guy goes in the house, goes upstairs, comes out on his roof. A helicopter comes by and says, hey, listen, I'm the last thing smoking out of here. You need to grab this ladder, get on up here, and we'll pull you out. And the guy says, no, I'm good. God's got me. Well, the waters continue to rise. He falls off the roof. He drowns. And when he gets to heaven, the first thing he's hot. The first thing he wants is to see Jesus because he's got a complaint. I depended on you, he said. Why didn't you help me? And Jesus says, I sent you a weather report. I sent you a man in a boat. I sent you a man in a helicopter. What do you want from me? You see what I mean? God gives us the ability to reason, the ability to think through problems, not only to protect us, but to act as his representative on earth. Animals don't have that. We have that exclusively from him, and we need to use that. All right? So that's why I have the take that I do on him separating his camp. All right. Anyway, that's bad.
It's working.
Well, it ain't working well enough. Airplay passcode. Okay, tell you what we're going to do.
The old-fashioned way.
I'm going to drop all this high-fangled stuff. I don't know what that is. Don't have time to figure it out. All right. It'll be there. There you go.
Wow.
All right.
I'm impressed.
So am I. I'm a little surprised. All right. The messengers returned to Jacob saying, we came to your brother Esau and he's coming to meet you. He's coming with 400 men. Jacob was greatly afraid and distressed, so he divided his people. Okay. If one, okay, right. We talked about that. All right. Where's all this happening? Now, he's pretty close to home. He's come from Haran all the way down here. It's called the Zarka River today, but this is the river. Oh, gosh. Now the name escapes me. It'll come to me. Anyway, they're on one side of the river, and coming from the south and west is Esau. And so Jacob now separates his family into two camps, puts one on the near side of the river, and then later in the evening, he's going to put the other camp on the near side of the river, and Jacob is going to stay alone on the safe side of the Jabbok River. Did you hear what I just said? He's going to take his family, split them into two camps. He's going to put one camp over here on the danger side of the river, the side closest to Esau. And then later on that evening, he's going to take the second part of his camp and he's going to move them. Now they're still separated, but they're both going to be on the danger side of the river, facing Esau. And once he passes that second part of his family, he's going to stay back here on the safe side of the river. What do you make of that? I'll tell you what I make of it. Jacob is still being Jacob. Jacob is afraid, and he puts his family and all that he has forward, and he stays on the backside of the river. Now, we'll see here that Jacob prays. And this, folks, is the first recording of a prayer between Jacob and God since we met Jacob way back. This is the first time we hear him praying. Why is he praying? Why is he praying?
He's afraid.
Because he's afraid. What does God have to do to get us to pray? I mean, Jacob's doing what we would all do if we were afraid for our lives. That's when we pray, isn't it? You know how they say there's no atheist in foxholes? When somebody's shooting at you, everybody prays. So that's a gimme. Let's take a look at the prayer. Should probably move a little faster. Lee, verses 9 to 12, please.
And Jacob said, O God of my father Abraham and God of my father Isaac, O Lord, who said to me, return to your country and to your kindred, that I may do you good. I am not worthy of the least of all the deeds of steadfast love and all the faithfulness that you have shown to your servant. For with only my staff I crossed this Jordan, and now I have become two camps. Please deliver me from the hand of my brother, from the hand of Esau, for I fear him, that he may come and attack me, the mothers with the children. But you said, I will surely do you good, and make your offspring as the sand of the sea, which cannot be numbered for the multitude.
You should do voiceovers. I really felt Jacob's fear there as you were reading that. So this little tidbit's important, I think. At this point, Jacob is 97 years old. 97. He was 77 when he tricked his father and left home 20 years earlier. Did you know that? I can explain to you how I got that, but we don't have time. Anyway, the old man's praying. The fear has driven him to his knees. What does it take? What does it take? What does God have to wait on from you before you'll pray to him? What has to happen to you in order for you to go to your knees and pray to God? Something to think about. Okay? Now, this is almost a model prayer. Almost a model prayer. Let's take a look at it. First of all, Jacob prays humbly. He says, I am not worthy. That's good. We ought to model humility in our prayers. Secondly, Jacob prays specifically, right? Please deliver me from the hand of my brother, from the hand of Esau, for I fear him that he may come and attack me, the mothers with the children. That's pretty specific. Tell God what you want. We should model that. Thirdly, Jacob prays on the basis of what God has already revealed to him. He says, but you said, God, I will surely do you good. I will make your offspring as the sand of the sea, which cannot be numbered for multitude. God has already revealed this to Jacob, and Jacob brings this to mind as he speaks to God. It's almost like saying, not just for me, God, but for the sake of your word, your credibility as God's on the line. A pretty good argument. Now, I said this is almost a model prayer. Almost a model prayer. There's one deficiency, in my opinion, with this prayer. Can you tell what it is? Let's go back up here. And Jacob said, O God, my father, God of my father Abraham, and God of my father Isaac. Anybody have any issues with that?
It's not Jacob's God.
It's not Jacob's God yet. All the way back when God spoke to him at Bethel and gave him the vision of the angels ascending and descending from heaven. Till now, he's been given very recently, right, a vision of angels that are moving with him. Yet Jacob is not claiming God as his personal God. Oh God, my father, of my father Abraham, and God of my father Isaac. Excuse me. So the deficiency here, the detractor, is that God is not yet the personal God to Jacob. That's going to change tonight. Verses 22 to 28, Dawn, please.
And Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him until the breaking of the day. When the man saw that he did not prevail against Jacob, he touched his hip socket, and Jacob's hip was put out of joint as he wrestled with him. Then he said, "Let me go, for the day has broken." But Jacob said, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." And he said to him, "What is your name?" And he said, "Jacob." Then he said, "Your name shall no longer be Jacob, but Israel, for you have striven with God and with men and have prevailed."
Okay. What is going on here? Remember now, the family is on the other side of the river. Jacob is alone. It's the middle of the night. And now it says here, a man wrestles with him. Where did this man come from? Who is this man? And what is this conversation they're having while they're wrestling? Let's take a look at it in some components here. First of all, a man here refers to an angelic being in the physical form and substance of a man. The man appears and they start wrestling. Period. Okay? But we'll see later on that there's some evidence here. Hey.
Hello.
That there's some evidence here that this is not some man that just walked up from the desert and started fighting him, all right? This is an angelic being in the form and substance of a man. We'll see that. The physical match is initiated by this heavenly being. Jacob wasn't looking for trouble. The man just appeared and started fighting him. That's important because this wrestling match in the middle of the night is clearly not among equals. How do we know that? Because the man, after they've been wrestling for a time, okay, they're tussling, and the scripture says, when the man saw that he did not prevail against Jacob, that is, you know, when you're wrestling, one or the other guy, eventually, when you're getting the best of them, the guy taps out or submits, says stop, okay? Jacob never said stop. That's what it means when it says the man saw that he did not prevail against Jacob. That is, Jacob didn't give up, right? But when he saw that, this man touched Jacob's hip socket and put Jacob's hip out of joint. And that's why I say this match is clearly not among equals. If I can, now I'm wrestling with you, I grant you that. Okay. But I'm probably wrestling with you because I want to. Because if I have the power to, just by touching your hip, throw it out of joint, doesn't it make sense that this wrestling match is not a real who's going to win and who's going to lose? No. If I can put you out of commission by touching you, the purpose of the wrestling match, the purpose of the wrestling match is not to see who the better man is. There's some other reason that this wrestling is happening. Does that make sense? Okay, good. So Jacob, now crippled, right? His hip's out of joint. And if you've ever wrestled, you can't really wrestle when your hip's out of joint, okay? But he doesn't give up. He's actually got a hold of this angelic being in the form of a man. And he will not let go, he says, unless you, what? Bless me. Oh, it appears Jacob knows who he's wrestling with. Who is the arbiter of blessings? God. Jacob seems to know at this point, I will not let you go unless you bless me. He knows who he's wrestling with. Why does the angelic being ask Jacob his name here? The angelic being says, what is your name? And he said, Jacob. Why do you think he asks him that? Remember, I told you all Jacob's life, he's been a trickster.
And that's what his name means.
That's exactly what his name means. Supplanter or trickster. And Jacob gets by fooling people, right? By conniving, looking for the angle and so forth. He depends on his own cunning and wiles. Why do you think, with that in mind now, why do you think that the angelic being asked Jacob his name?
Wants him to admit who he is.
Admit who you are. Admit who you are. come clean, Jacob. We're wrestling all night long. I want you to tell me who you are. That is, who you've been the whole of your life until this very moment. What is your name? All right? And then finally, another question. Who is the man with whom Jacob wrestles? And what does the word prevail mean here? Let's take the first one, though. Who is this man with whom Jacob wrestles? Well, remember now, he said, I won't let you go until you bless me. So that's one indicator of who this man is. And then he says in verse 28, your name shall no longer be called Jacob, but Israel, for you have striven with whom?
God.
And have prevailed. So, first question, who is the man with whom Jacob wrestles?
God.
Don't be afraid to say it.
God.
It's God. It's God. I have read so many commentaries on this passage who cannot come to, and they don't come to this conclusion. I don't know. How do you miss that? The man says of himself, first of all, who is the only being who has prerogative to change Jacob's name from Jacob to Israel? That's not a mere angel. Angels don't do that. Okay? Whenever we've seen a person's name change from one thing to another, it was God doing it. And then he says further, for you have striven with God. He adds, and with men, and have prevailed. All right, so my position, the only correct position, is that Jacob has been wrestling all night with God. God initiated this wrestling match as an object lesson. An object lesson. Jacob, you have been struggling with me your whole life. You're 97 years old. You're about to meet your brother who wants to kill you. And before you cross the river and get into that, I want you to finish this wrestling match with me. Stop fighting with me. Admit who you are so we can be on the same team, our wills aligned. How about that for a plan, Jacob? Stop depending on yourself. Stop depending on your wiles and depend on me for a little bit. See if that is a better plan for your life. You get it?
Yeah.
What does it mean to prevail here? Earlier, Lee and I were having a little debate about something unimportant. The point is, and Bob, you asked, who won? My answer was, we all did.
Mm-hmm.
Because I realized that Lee was right in what he was saying, and because I'm getting ready to teach the very thing we were talking about, we're all winners because I'm going to teach it better. You see what I mean? What does the word prevail mean here? You have striven with God and with men, and you have prevailed. Does it mean he won the match? The wrestling match? No. You have finally come to the point that you can depend on me, and I can give you the full benefit of the blessings and protections promised to your father Abraham and your father Isaac, and now to you. That's how you won. That's how you prevailed. If you do it. If you don't do it, then you don't get all those blessings. You understand? That's how Jacob prevails. All right. And then finally, verses 29 to 32. Lee, please.
Then Jacob asked him, please tell me your name. But he said, why is it that you ask my name? And there he blessed him. So Jacob called the name of the place Peniel, saying, for I have seen God face to face, and yet my life has been delivered. The sun rose upon him as he passed Peniel, limping because of his hip. Therefore, to this day, the people of Israel do not eat the sinew of the thigh that is on the hip socket, because he touched the socket of Jacob's hip on the sinew of the thigh.
Okay. Jacob says, you asked me my name. Let me ask you your name. What does God say? Why is it that you ask my name? Why does he answer a question with this question? Because he's God. God knows that Jacob knows who he is. You know who I am. I shouldn't have to introduce myself to you. Jacob, I've been with you since the day you were born. I told your mother about you before you were born. And I've been with you. Not only have I been with you, but unlike most other men on the top side of this earth, I have revealed myself to you 3-4 times in your lifetime. I've shown you angels. Twice. Jacob, you're asking me who I am? Most human beings ever don't get that kind of introduction. Do you want me to put your other hip out, Jacob? You know who I am. Jacob called the name of the place Peniel. Now, if you didn't get that evidence that this is God from the last slide, would you get it from this? The place Peniel, saying, "For I have seen God face to face, and yet I live." Okay? There's no question of who the man is with whom Jacob was wrestling. Peniel means face of God. And there he blessed him. There God blessed Jacob. And then the sun rose. Oh, then the sun rose. You see this dawn, this whole object lesson. The sun now rises on a new day because Jacob is not a perfect person, but a new creature. Because he now has a personal relationship with God. He didn't have that the night before, but he has it now. Therefore, to this day, the people of Israel don't eat the sinew of the thigh, so forth, so on, just to commemorate that this happened. Okay? And that is our lesson for today. Now understand, all of the details that I gave you really only build up to this one main point. Is the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, now the God of Jacob, is he your God? Is he your God? Is he my God? When you pray to him, do you say, God of my fathers? Or do you say, my God, my God? That's an important distinction. Let God be your God. And by let, that means not only acknowledge it, but walk it out in your life. Are you going to put God in the backseat, or are you going to let him drive? Today, tomorrow, the next day. Any questions? All right. Well, thank you very much for your attention. Who wants to close this in prayer?